The first time Evan Cole heard the Chevelle cough itself awake. It was just before sunrise, that quiet hour when the world feels bruised but honest. The engine stuttered like it was begging for mercy, metal on metal. A sound that carried through the thin walls of his rented garage and settled deep in his chest. Evan wiped his hands on a grease-stained rag and leaned against the open bay door, watching his neighbor struggle with the ignition again. The car was a faded blue 1970 Chevelle. Once proud, now tired, its paint dulled by years of neglect and weather. It looked a lot like Evan felt, still standing, still trying, but worn down by life. Evan was a mechanic because he had to be, not because it made him rich. The shop barely paid the bills, and some weeks it didn't even do that. He fixed cars for people who couldn't afford dealerships, patched engines instead of replacing them, and often accepted half pay with a promise that never came. Still, he showed up every day, because fixing things felt like proof that broken didn't have to mean finished. That morning, the woman stepped out of the Chevelle with a sigh that carried more weight than frustration. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, dressed simply, her hair pulled back in a practical way. She noticed Evan watching and offered an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry if it's loud," she said. "I keep hoping today will be the day it just works." Evan shrugged. "Old cars talk. That one's asking for help." She laughed softly, but there was sadness in it. "Story of my life." Her name was Clara. She had moved in next door a few months ago, kept to herself, waved politely but never lingered. Evan had noticed she always parked the Chevelle carefully, like it mattered more than a machine should. He hesitated, then nodded toward the car. "If you want, I can take a look. No charge. Neighbor's discount." Clara blinked, surprised. "Really? I don't have much to spare." Evan smiled, tired but sincere. "I didn't say anything about money." She agreed, reluctantly, and handed him the keys like she was giving up a piece of herself. When Evan opened the hood, the smell of old oil and history hit him. This car had been loved once. He could see it in the careful repairs, the parts that didn't quite match but had been chosen with intention. As he worked, Clara hovered nearby, asking questions, sharing small memories. The Chevelle had belonged to her late husband. They'd driven it across states, through heartbreaks and victories. Fixing it wasn't just about transportation, it was about holding on. By the time Evan finished, his hands were aching and the sun was high. The engine purred smoother than it had in years. Clara's eyes filled with tears when she turned the key. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Evan shrugged again, embarrassed. "Just keep it running." He watched her drive away, unaware that this simple act of kindness was about to change his life in ways no engine ever could. Over the next few weeks, Evan kept noticing the Chevelle roll in and out of the driveway next door, sounding better each time. Clara would wave, sometimes bring over coffee or a slice of homemade bread. Small gestures that felt big to someone used to being forgotten. Evan never asked for payment, and she never offered again. There was an unspoken understanding between them. This was about something deeper than money. One evening, Clara knocked on Evan's garage door just as he was closing up. Her eyes were troubled. "It won't start again," she said quietly. "I know you already did so much, but..." Evan grabbed his jacket without hesitation. The problem was bigger this time. The transmission was failing, a costly repair even with used parts. Evan sat back on his heels, calculating numbers he didn't have. "I can fix it," he said slowly. "But it'll take time. And parts." Clara swallowed. "If it's too much." "It's not," Evan cut in, though he wasn't sure that was true. "We'll figure it out." He spent nights after work searching junkyards, calling favors, trading labor for parts. His own bills piled up, but he ignored them. Fixing the Chevelle felt right. It felt necessary. As he worked, he learned more about Clara. She spoke of losing her husband suddenly, of stepping away from a life she no longer recognized. She never talked about her past career, only that she wanted something simple now. When the car was finally finished, Evan was exhausted. He handed Clara the keys, bracing himself to explain that he couldn't afford to keep doing this. Instead, she hugged him. Tight, grateful, human. A few days later, Evan received a letter. No return address. Inside was a check for more money than he'd seen in his life. He thought it was a mistake. When he rushed next door, Clara was waiting, calm but nervous. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to change anything," she said. "I'm not just getting by. I sold a company years ago. I'm a millionaire." Evan stared, stunned. "Then why?" "Because you treated me like a neighbor," she said softly. "Not a wallet." Tears burned Evan's eyes. He had fixed her car without knowing who she was. And somehow, that made all the difference. Evan didn't cash the check right away. He couldn't. It sat on his workbench for days. A quiet reminder that kindness had a way of circling back. When he finally spoke to Clara again, his voice shook. "I didn't help you for this," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I wanted you to have it." They talked late into the night. Clara told him about the company she'd built from nothing. The pressure, the loneliness at the top. Money had given her comfort, but it hadn't given her peace. After her husband died, she stepped away from it all, moved into a modest neighborhood, drove an old Chevelle that reminded her who she used to be. "You reminded me too," she said, "of who I want to be." Clara didn't just want to help Evan pay his bills. She wanted to invest in him, in his shop, in his honesty. She offered to fund a full garage upgrade, better equipment, fair wages for employees. Evan hesitated, afraid of strings. "There are none," she promised. "Just keep being you." The shop transformed slowly, carefully. Evan hired 2 young mechanics who reminded him of himself, taught them patience instead of shortcuts. Word spread. Customers came not just for repairs, but because they felt respected. One afternoon, Evan watched Clara arrive in the Chevelle, now gleaming, restored but still familiar. She stepped out smiling, lighter than before. "You fixed more than a car," she said. Evan shook his head. "We fixed each other." Years later, Evan would still think about that first morning, the sound of an engine struggling, the choice to help without expecting anything back. The shop thrived, but Evan never forgot what it meant to be poor, to be tired, to feel invisible. Clara became a quiet part of the community, funding scholarships, helping families anonymously. She never flaunted her wealth. She just showed up. On the anniversary of her husband's passing, Evan helped her take the Chevelle out for a long drive. The road stretched wide and open, the engine humming strong. "Funny, isn't it?" Clara said. "How something old and broken can lead you somewhere new." Evan smiled. "That's kind of my specialty." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and blue, Evan realized the truth he'd been living all along. Kindness isn't an investment made for profit. It's a risk taken for humanity. And sometimes, when you least expect it, that risk comes back and changes everything.